Welcome back to Between the Levees. Today's episode will be audio only, which is just due to some technical difficulties we're experiencing here. But I am joined finally by retired Captain Ted Davisson. He was on the Delta Queen passenger vessels from the early 70s until 1980 when he joined the Nobra Pilots Association and was a Nobra pilot for 42 years. He was also involved in an incident some years back that we will discuss at length, as well as the recent events in Baltimore. Captain Davisson, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Glad we could finally get this one done. I know we've been trying this, it feels like about a year. But whatever the case, tell me how you got your start in the industry.
Well, when I was in high school and college, actually, I went to work on the steamboats, the Delta Queen and the Mississippi Queen, to earn money during the summer vacations. And when I got out of college, I realized I had accumulated enough Coast Guard time to sit for a Coast Guard mate's license. And from that point on, I stayed on the steamboats and earned a master's upon towing license and a first class pilot license. And then from that point on, I stepped into the Nobra Pilots Association.
What were you studying in college?
Education, actually.
Well, tell me about your childhood. What led you to the steamboats?
Well, my dad was transferred here from Texas in 66, and I went to high school here. And as bizarre as it may sound, uh, I was working at a Shakey's Pizza place, and I became friends with the banjo player. And he and I were talking one night, and he told me about the Delta Queen. His name was Bert Peck, and he told me that if I went down to the boat, which was at the Avondale shipyards, and I could use his name to the captain, Captain Ernest Wagner, that he would give me a job as a deckhand. And sure enough, that all happened.
Well, what did your dad do for a living? What did he get transferred down here to New Orleans area for?
He worked for the government. He worked for the Veterans Administration.
Okay. And was there any family history in the maritime industry?
No, none whatsoever.
Well, tell me about life on deck on the Delta Queen.
Well, it was a true adventure for someone of my age and background. I seldom left New Orleans prior to working on the steamboats, and I was able to see America's rivers, the Mississippi, the Ohio, the upper Mississippi, and the Tennessee and the Cumberland. And it was equivalent to years ago when kids ran away to join the circus. I literally ran away to join a steamboat. And there's an old expression that the river gets in your blood, and that's what happened to me.
Well, fill me in on that first time stepping on the vessel. And I guess of all the places you ran, what was the prettiest place or your favorite run to be on?
Well, it's hard to say. The lower Mississippi River has the old plantation homes, but the upper Mississippi River has places like St. Louis and the Arch, and it has hills and dells, and it's just a more scenic river once you get above Cairo, Illinois, where the upper and lower Mississippi River come together.
What did you like about the Ohio?
What I found fascinating about the Ohio River, it was similar to the upper Mississippi, but there were, and like the upper Mississippi, it had a number of lock and dams, and we would lock through these different locks in the middle of the day and night, and it was very scenic. And the further up you went on the Ohio River, the more hilly and mountainous it became. And we stopped at places like Louisville and Madison, Indiana, and Cincinnati. And Oh, Pittsburgh, and it was just my dream to see the river and all these different places I'd never been before.
How many passengers were usually on board?
I, to the best of my recollection, I think the Delta Queen held about 120, and I think the Mississippi Queen had over 200. I don't recall exactly, but I think that's pretty close.
Any good stories come to mind from your time on those vessels before you made the jump to Nobra?
Well, at different times, I was a deckhand. One summer, I worked in the engine room. One summer, I was a porter. But my favorite positions were the mate, the pilot, and eventually the captain. I was a relief captain, and it was just nice going to all these little old quaint river towns that just really brought to life Mark Twain's book about life on the river and the different towns that he would go to and visit.
How does one earn his way up into the wheelhouse or the helm, I guess, of these vessels?
Well, over the years, the Coast Guard regulations have evolved, but basically, you need to start off in the deck department and accumulate enough time, which I did do during my summer vacations. Plus, also, I went to the National River Academy in Helena, Arkansas, where the Coast Guard recognized it as a river related maritime academy. And I was able to get a second class operator's license there. But because of the Delta Queen and Mississippi Queen's weight and tonnage, I was able to get a unlimited pilot license and a unlimited master's license, which was required by the Nobra Pilot Association. So by working on the steamboats, I was able to get licensed and fulfill the requirements to become a Nobra ship pilot.
How was your time at the National Maritime Academy? Does that place still exist?
No, unfortunately, they went out of business. Don't recall when, but it was interesting. It was a 2-year program, and we would spend 50 days on a towboat and 50 days in the classroom, and we would alternate back and forth for 2 years. And like I mentioned, I came out with a uh, operator of an unexpected towing vessel, and that was just a milestone along the way to get the larger license that was required by the Nobra Ship Pilot Association.
Well, fill me in on your transition to the Nobra Pilots Association.
Well, I was an outsider, had no family relations, and much of the time, especially during the winter months, the boat would operate down here between New Orleans and Vicksburg. And being a pilot at times, I got to know the ship pilots. And when the need arose, they would have an election to bring in new apprentice candidate pilots. And they got to know me, and I got to know them. And I didn't get in the first election, but I did get in the second election. And I was an outsider, and I guess they liked what they saw in me and what license I had. I got a first class pilot license for the entire lower Mississippi River, and they liked what they saw in me, and they voted me in 1979, actually, and became a ship pilot in a Louisiana State commissioned ship pilot in January of 1980.
And what was the, I guess, training process for that role?
At the time, it was a 6-month apprentice program where we worked 6 days on and 1 day off. And we would ride with different pilots on different sections of the river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And we would observe ship handling and different aspects of piloting. And it was just it was a grueling 6 months, but we would work days sometimes, we would work night sometimes on different ships, going different directions, doing different things. and with different pilots. And we are the people in my apprentice group. We learned the trade of ship handling and piloting ships on the lower Mississippi River, which is much different than either the steamboats or the towboats, or even the tugboats for that matter.
Tell me about your first experience stepping on one of those vessels, and I guess what was one of the more surprising things you saw from that vantage point?
Well, first of all, on the steamboats, the pilot house is located all the way forward, and the majority of the ships, the bridge or the pilot house is located all the way aft. And it was just amazing how big these ships were compared to where I came from, and how they handled, and the foreign crews, and learning the ship handling language, more or less. And it was a eye-opening experience, and I thoroughly enjoyed it because it was such a dynamic learning experience for me and the other people in the apprentice program. But I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, that brings me, I guess, next to the Brightfield incident, December 14th, I believe it was. Of what year?
It was my brother's birthday, actually. It was 1997, I believe. No, 1996, excuse me. And it was my brother's birthday. And prior to the incident, I had every intention of getting off the ship and going to his birthday party. We both lived in Algiers at the time. And with the incident, of course, everything changed as far as the birthday party went.
Well, fill me in on your career as an overpilot from 1980 until December of 1996, and then we'll cover this Brightfield incident that has been mentioned a few times, I think, on this podcast.
Well, it was a very enjoyable career. I love the river. I love the ship handling. I love the people. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I enjoyed talking to these foreign captains and mates and helmsmen, and learning about their countries and their culture and their lifestyle. And it was just a very enjoyable experience for me. And I just love piloting. It's just something I always enjoyed it. For me, it wasn't so much work as it was pleasure. And the standing joke is I would have paid them to let me do the same job. But I just enjoyed the work.
Sure. Now, what kind of hitch were y'all working? Was it 7 on, 7 off?
Right. We had two work groups, A watch and B watch. And you're correct. We worked 7 days on, 7 days off, 24/7, and we'd worked on call. So we could possibly get called in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day. And what was unique about it, well, first of all, you weren't in a office, you were outside and enjoying a beautiful river. And it was just very enjoyable for me, and it was a challenge too. That's what I enjoyed about it as well. Piloting ships on America's most narrow and congested river is not so much for the faint of heart, but it was just an enjoyable challenge. Just leave it at that, I guess.
Sure. Well, what do you remember the day of the Brightfield incident prior to getting down there around, was that around Algiers Point?
It was just above Algiers Point, and as as we were passing under the Greater New Orleans Highway Bridge, uh, I couldn't help but notice that the engine had gone quiet, and the monitor that shows the engine revolutions had dropped down to zero. And I knew immediately what had happened, that we had lost the plant or the engine. And I immediately asked the Chinese captain what was the problem. And for one reason or another, he and the mate were in a heated discussion, and he wouldn't answer my question, but I knew what the problem was. And fortunately, we were able to land the ship between a cruise ship and a casino boat with no damage or injury to either vessel. But of course, it did do a lot of damage to the river walk itself.
Where did you board that vessel and what time of day was it?
Well, that particular week, we had fog every night, and we have in the morning what we refer to as fog orders, which is a 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. Notice for the assignment. And I boarded the ship at the Laplace anchorage just below the little community of Reserve, and it was anchored there. And after I had a discussion with the captain, a Chinese captain that spoke broken English, I had unfortunately a limited master pilot exchange because of the language issue. But after we had the discussion of, the overall condition of the ship, he and I both felt it was okay to get underway, and we called the tugboats, turned the ship around, and got underway and went toward New Orleans.
In whatever detail you care to share, fill me in from the moment you noticed the engines shut down until that vessel landed.
Well, like I mentioned, everything went quiet. Even on these modern ships of today, you feel a little vibration and you hear a little rumble from the engine, and it went quiet. No vibration, no noise. And the indicator, the monitor indicated that there was no revolutions on the engine. And I knew we had a major issue. And I immediately notified the Coast Guard Vessel Traffic Service, called for tugboats, sounded the danger signal, and I did have steering. I didn't have the engine, but I did have steering. So I put I gave the helmsman a hard to starboard uh, rudder command, meaning to steer the ship to the right. Even though we didn't have the thrust from the propeller, we did have the current passing through the rudder, which helped steer the ship a little bit. But we were very fortunate that we didn't hit the cruise ship with hundreds of passengers or the casino boat with quite a few passengers. We landed a 700. we we landed a 738-foot ship with 40 feet of draft and a 900-foot vacancy between the cruise ship and the casino boat.
And what happened next once you caught your breath on that one? I think I was 10 and a half years old at that point. I vaguely remember this on the news, but I can tell you at 10, I was not paying much attention.
Well, after we literally, well, first of all, I was able to get the captain's attention, and I told him to let go the port anchor. No, let go both anchors, and he was able to let go the port anchor, and that helped minimize the damage to the dock. But after we came to a grinding halt with dust and concrete flying everywhere, I was amazed how some of the buildings, and especially the parking the lot, pancaked upon itself. And it was nothing short of a miracle from the standpoint that this parking lot, this parking garage was filled with cars with gasoline in them. Natural gas pipelines were severed, no explosions, no fires, and best of all, no fatalities. It's my understanding there were a few minor incidents from people evacuating the casino boat, but nothing serious to my knowledge. And it just amazed me how some of these buildings just collapsed on their own. And it was nothing short than a miracle that no one was hurt and there was no fires or explosions.
You said she had a 40-foot draft. What were y'all loaded down with? Do you remember the cargo?
It was grain. It was a grain ship. We call them bulkers, meaning dry bulk. It was loaded with grain from one of the elevators at the Reserve, Louisiana terminals.
How many tons would that have been with 40-foot draft?
Well, as I recall, I'm not sure in terms of tonnage, but the ship was around 73,000 tons of deadweight tonnage, and I think it was 39.6 on the draft, but it was a lot of grain. Let's just leave it at that.
Sure. And I did hear too from a previous guest that there were reports of bodies in the water, but it was actually mannequins that had flown off from the Riverwalk. Did
Oh
you
yeah,
see any of that?
yes, yes. It was. It took my breath away at first, and some up by this time that when the ship had finally stopped, some tugboats got alongside the ship and started pushing on it to hold it in, and also to hold the dock from falling over further. And one of the tug captains stuck his head out the window and pointed, and it first appeared like it was bodies falling out the windows. And a little later that evening, the state troopers reported 8 fatalities. And come to find out, it wasn't fatalities, it was mannequins floating in the water. And where I come from, you have to have a body to have a fatality, but these were mannequins floating in the river that fell out of the different stores there at the Riverwalk.
But it was not, in fact, human bodies after all.
Yes, sir.
Well, fill me in. I know, of course, you missed your brother's birthday party, at least the majority of it, but fill me in on the process after that incident happened, the rest of that day.
Well, after we came to the stop, I notified my office. They sent another pilot out to relieve me, so there would be a pilot on board the ship. And I immediately went and got a drug and alcohol test. The results were negative. I went to our office and met with our board of examiners and the president of the association, and with a few lawyers, of course, and gave a deposition. And that was pretty much it for that day. And then just went home and just gathered my thoughts and saw the reports on the TV.
And how much more did that investigation linger for you? How much more effort was there on your end for the events of that day?
Well, that was pretty much it for the day. And I was just beside myself that I didn't get more cooperation from this Chinese captain as far as telling me what was going on. And I, I just thank God that we didn't hit the cruise ship. At one point in time, we were headed directly at the cruise ship. And I would have bet my last dollar we were going to cut that cruise ship in half and kill a lot of people. But like I say, this was the hand of God stepped in and steered the ship away from the cruise ship and landed 738 feet of ship in a 900-foot hole. Didn't hit the cruise ship, didn't hit the gambling boat, and it was just nothing short of a miracle. And there was one story I heard where one lady had had a room facing the river. She went into the restroom, did her business, heard a rumble from outside her bathroom door, opened the bathroom door, and her room was gone. And thank goodness she had decided to go to the bathroom at that exact moment. And also, what helped at the time was that the hotel, for the most part, was empty because they were having high school football games at the Superdome. And so, fortunately, a lot of people were not in the hotel when the ship hit the dock.
Quite the series of very lucky uh, conditions there that morning. Um,
Absolutely.
well, you had what about 25, 26 more years out there as a Nobra pilot. Did any other stories come to mind? Not necessarily of that magnitude, but anything interesting you've seen out there over those years?
Well, there were a few things. One time I was on a ship the that unfortunately raised the boom on me at the last minute, even though I checked with the captain and the mate about the height of the ship. And unfortunately, the a mate, without notifying anyone, went all the way forward and picked up a boom. And as we were passing under the UEP Long Bridge, this boom that was raised without notice struck the underside of the bridge and put the UEP Long Bridge out of commission for about a week. And it was just things like that of less magnitude than the Brightfield and the Riverwalk, but it's just the risks we take out there, and we do our best to do a good job and a safe job and protect the people, property, and interests of the state of Louisiana. We're state commissioned pilots, but unfortunately, at times, human error steps in and things go awry.
Indeed, they do. Have you been following the news on this Dolly incident in Baltimore?
Yes, I have.
I'd like to stay away from speculation, obviously, but what what happened that evening or that early morning in your understanding?
Well, like you, I hate to speculate, but from the film footage I saw and everyone else saw, uh, there appears to be a major loss of power from the engine room because of the lights blinking on the ship, and that indicated to me that the generators lost power, and then a standby auxiliary generator kicked on and off. That's why the lights blinked, and my heart goes out to that pilot and the captain and the crew and those poor people that got lost in the waterway. And it just brought home the risks we take out there. And fortunately for everyone, 99% of the time things go as planned. But why that ship lost engine at the wrong time is just anyone's guess. And I'm sure those pilots, like Nobra pilots, are well trained and seasoned and professional. And he did everything he could to mitigate the damage, but sometimes it's just too little, too late, and in the wrong place.
Well, I am certainly no armchair expert. No idea, no experience or education in that regard. But in the video, it looks like they were almost positioned and turned into the pillar of that bridge. From your perspective, what those last moments were before it struck, what do you think was going on? Because I
Well,
heard too that one of the anchors may have both dropped, but one broke off.
well, that's news to me, and your guess is as good as mine. I haven't heard any detailed reports as of yet, but I'm thinking just possibly not only did they lose the plant, but possibly the rudder was stuck over in one direction. And although it lost thrust from the propeller, the headway through the water reacting on the rudder that may have been stuck, I don't know, may have steered the ship into that piling. That's just pure speculation on my part, but that'd be my opinion unless convinced otherwise.
Well, moving to some sort of speculation, what do you imagine may transpire in response to this incident, as far as regulatory, or do you think that incident in Baltimore will have an effect on the inland industry for the tugboats and the ships on the lower?
Well, it always does. It's like the ripples in a pond. When you toss a rock in it, it affects everyone everywhere. And not to second guess the state of Maryland, but I was a little surprised to see that first of all, that's a major waterway with ships of all sizes and tonnages and drafts. But those bridge piers, from what I saw, had little or no uh, fenders or islands around the piers that could buffer or safeguard the piers themselves. And to say if that same ship or any other vessel was going toward the pier, if there was some type of fender or buffer or island around the pier, just possibly the pier would not have been struck and broken in half.
Does every bridge on the lower from Baton Rouge down Does it have protection?
Some do and some don't. And why, I don't know. You would have to ask an engineering expert on that, but you would think with the amount of traffic that goes through these bridges, both under the bridges and on the roads above the bridges, you would think that those piers would be adequately protected to avoid being damaged by some type of passing vessel. It's beyond me why some do and some don't. I don't know.
Roger that. Well, that just about runs through the questions I had. Have you been following the podcast?
Yes, every so often, yes. Very interesting.
How many have you had a chance to listen to?
Boy, I'm not sure. I find it very enlightening and entertaining, but I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Well, sure, that's no problem. There any good stories from a what 50 some odd year career? Anything else come to mind from any of the jobs you held out there before we wrap this one up?
Well, no matter where you pilot, what you pilot, and how you pilot, 90% of these jobs on these trips are sort of almost to the degree of boring. But there's those few that become so exciting that just makes your head spin. But years ago, I was on a rush order to go up to a midstream buoy system where a ship that was used as a floating elevator was in the process of sinking. And I reported to the ship that was tied off to this other hull of a ship. And the captain and the agent begged me to move the ship away from the sinking hull that was pulling the other ship over to the right side. And finally, I got permission from the Coast Guard to do so. And as we let go our last line, this hull of a ship that was used as a floating elevator literally sank right before our eyes into the river. And as it was sinking, rats were jumping off the ship. And as they were jumping off the sinking hull of a ship, they were being caught and eaten by catfish. It was a feeding frenzy while this hull of a ship was sinking in the river. And there were crowds on the levee watching this. And we had a view right beside this thing happening. And it was the first time I ever witnessed a ship or a hull of a ship sink right in front of me.
Quite the show that day, huh?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt, it was bizarre. It was something I'd never seen before, and frankly, I hope I never have to see another ship sink again.
I agree with you 100%, sir. Thank you very much for your time and for being a part of this little project.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. We'll keep in touch with you.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.